Nat, how's it going?
It's going well. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm looking forward to our conversation because I've been following you on LinkedIn for a while. And what I appreciate about your content is you don't sidestep your goal. You're saying, hey, if you want to help me, get off the bench, get in the game, I can help you, right? As opposed to a lot of other creators where they're trying to, I don't know, like sidestep it and like build up this suspense and so on and so forth. You're like, look, I'm here to help you. No, I don't have a limited number of spots available. Like, just reach out to me. Let's make this happen. So I appreciate the boldness and the bluntness of your content.
Thanks. I appreciate it. Yeah. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem as though there's enough of it out there, but I guess that's not really my problem.
Yeah, yeah, there you go. But let's get some background on you. So Nat, who
Sure.
are you? What are you all about?
Uh, I guess from a career perspective, or how I started my journey. I guess I was a recruiter by trade for a number of years in New York City. Never really liked it too much. So it was did a lot of work with investment banking and sales and trading. And just one day out of the blue in 2007, a buddy of mine, he emailed me this website called Blogspot, which I had never heard of, which is still Google's blogging platform. And I started writing on there, and I kind of got obsessed with just building traffic and seeing how well I could do. And eventually, I started a website called Uncoached, and it grew pretty quickly. I worked pretty hard at it, and eventually, it got enough traffic where I was, at a point where I could take a risk. And I think I had, I don't know, 6 to 9 months or so savings or whatever. I always tell people, hey, like, don't just quit unknowingly and not being prepared. So I was reasonably prepared to go for it, and thankfully I never turned back, and ran a reasonably successful portfolio of websites for a number of years. I still own most of them. Sold a big one last year, so that was a nice little win there. But it was really like 2020 or so. I started doing social media a little bit more and getting on LinkedIn and doing all those videos, and that's what helped me grow. And from there till now, it was really just iterating and kind of coming up with a very specific person that I'd be targeting and coaching, which is what I do now. It's mostly around business and branding are probably the two biggest areas that I help people with. And that's really where I am. LinkedIn's probably my main home as far as social media goes, and I spread things out and distribute it across all channels. But yeah, as far as everything goes, that's where I'm at, and that's where I continue to stay for the time being.
I want to add a bit more context in regards to your business that you started.
Sure.
So you're essentially generating revenue online through a series of websites, and my guess is you're generating revenue through affiliate marketing. Is that correct, or is it
Actually, I
different?
don't do any affiliate marketing. Very, very little. The affiliate marketing is a very small part of the business, so that would be really just Amazon revenue, which is very, very minimal. The majority of it actually comes from display advertising, so mostly banner ads and video ads and things like that. So it's a traffic based model.
Okay. You sound rather humble, but would I be correct in saying you've made millions off this model?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks for that, Nat. So, I mean, how are things going these days? I mean, if you met up with one of your buddies from high school like, at an airport or a bar, just randomly, and you said, "Hey, how are things going?" What would you say?
I would say things are going great. I would say I'm in a wonderful place, that I have a ton of time that I can spend with my family. I generally don't worry about a whole lot, and I'm definitely more present focused than I've ever been. And yeah, I think I'm in a unique and extremely lucky position to sort of be able to do what I want pretty much every day. And I think it's a blessing that everything I do is pretty much a choice. I think what everybody does is a choice, but I truly think I take that to heart, or at least as best as I possibly can. So that's probably what I would say.
Yeah, I read "Be Your Future Self Now" by Dr. Ben Hardy over the break, And he said the goal should be to move from needing to wanting. Like, I don't want this. I don't need this big house. I just want it, right? I don't need to get this, next opportunity. I just want it. And doing so unapologetically. And that's what I feel from you, talking to you now and in your content. You're like, I just want it. You're like I don't need this stuff. I just want it. And I think there's a need for that boldness on the platform and in the world of entrepreneurship in general. But what I want to do now is go back. I want to go back to a time when things weren't so well, when you weren't so content, and whatever you feel comfortable sharing in regards to that, we're all ears. But I know that without even hearing your story, I know it's going to encourage a lot of us that are listening right now.
Sure, I appreciate it. I think something that maybe not a lot of folks know about me is I've always had a very, very high level of anxiety. You know, reasonably crippling at times. And so I've been probably in and out of therapy since I was 8 years old, for so a very, very long time. Probably because both my parents are therapists, so I don't know if that had anything to do with it. But in terms of when, I think those first 6, 7 years out of college were very, very stressful for me because I was always trying to find, like, what did I want to do? Like, what should I do with my life? And I put a ton of pressure on myself with that stuff. And it led to just so many various places and decisions and things in my life that were just wild. I mean, I worked in the World Trade Center and I was on the 82nd floor and I quit my job like 4 weeks prior to 9/11. I mean, that was pretty eye-opening and insane. I have just, there were just a lot of things, and I wound up moving to California, and I had a nervous breakdown out there because I was drinking and smoking all the time and didn't know what the hell I wanted to do. And this was a very, very young age, just too young, and didn't know what the hell I wanted. Spent a night in jail once. That was a result of having like a tiny bit of weed on me. So that one I kind of don't even like care about, but
Can't count that.
all things I could talk about now because I don't work for a corporation and who cares, and it was expunged. But I mean, this is literally 20 years ago. But fast forward to a little bit more recent, I think what I've come to realize is that rather than focusing so much on the things that I either wanted or thought I wanted or put so much pressure on myself to want, I really developed a really good knack for avoiding the things I didn't want. And that has been an instrumental part in sort of moving forward. I went on medication as well, probably about 10, 12 years ago, which, if anyone's listening, I do not take that lightly. That's a very, very, important decision that people have to make for themselves and likely their psychiatrist or something like that. But I think every single time I got to the point of not wanting to do something and actually acting on it, things just got better and better and better. And then things took a really, really big turn when I quit my job. Scariest time of my life, also the best time of my life. Like, something went off. It was just a switch. As soon as I didn't have that authority in my life anymore, I just went off the wall and went crazy. And the funny thing is I ended up having a business partner for about 10 years. And there were some years that were literally some of the best years of my life financially and some of the worst from a stress standpoint. One of the worst times was when my sites went down, which is a common thing, but they were down for like a week, which is not common.
Right.
And today, looking back, I lost over 12 pounds in a week because I didn't eat. So my way of dealing with stress was actually the opposite. I don't eat, I starve. And I will never forget that time in my life because I talk about it to this day where it's like, if that happened again, I would freak out. Of course I would freak out. You have every right to freak out when your whole business is sort of, up in the air. But man, I look back at that person, I'm like, there's so many tools and so many things you can do to mitigate that and not make it such a big deal and your whole life. I would never downplay the importance of things that are legitimately scary, but just the way you go through them. And I just think that comes through time. And nowadays it's, life ain't easy, right? We all have to deal with bullshit and, plenty. and I'd be lying if it were any different for me. But I think the ability to let those things come in and pass is way easier every year. So uh, hopefully that answers your question a little bit.
It does, and it reminds me of my own reactions to setbacks in life. Like when I would get fired from a job, I'm like, oh, it's the end of the world. I'm never going to work at this company called eChalk again. Have you heard of eChalk? Yeah, me neither. So yeah, I mean, it's like, but it feels like the end of the world, right? I mean, one time I got laid off. Literally, the company was called eChalk, which you guys can all Google. I was out of work for 5 months. I'm out of work for 5 months. I have no savings whatsoever. My electricity got turned off. So good luck trying to get a job when you don't even have internet or electricity. But but I eventually got a job. I got a job at Adobe, and my income went up by like $60,000. But even then, it was embarrassing because I had to fly out to Utah for like 3 weeks of training, and my new manager was like, "Oh yeah, just put it on your credit card." I'm like, about that. That is actually not an option. But I was able to let go of that guilt and shame, so I could actually do a good job at my job. But I want to go back. I want to go back to 9/11 because you said you had this moment when you left your job, but for me, it seems like 9/11 when you realize, hey, I could have died if I didn't, leave 2 weeks before. Did you feel like you had a new lease on life or anything? And if so, why did you not change that behavior sooner? That's what I'm curious about.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I was probably too young to process that in that kind of mature way. I mean, I was only 22 years old. What I am grateful for is that it's funny. I almost am grateful for the anxiety that I had in that job because that anxiety would build up so much in every job that eventually I would leave. And so the initial job that I had was, you know, 2+ hour commute each way. I lived on Long Island with my folks, so I would commute all the way to World Trade Center from Port Washington, which was a pain in the ass. It was You're basically going to Penn Station, taking two subways, and you're downtown, and whatever, taking the elevator, 82 flights, 82 flights. But another moment that I'll never forget also was, and I've talked about that to this day as well, is you feel cool wearing the suit, right? You're 22 years old and you feel like a badass. But it was literally on that first week, I remember seeing this guy in a suit. He must have been in his 60s, and he just looked miserable. He just looked so beaten down by life. I'll never forget that. And it didn't take me long to start sleeping on the train and like realizing, hey, this kind of sucks. Not to mention, I'm cold calling from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. every day, which absolutely was brutal. So it just got to me so much that eventually I just quit with no job prospects, no nothing. I just flat out said, I can't do this anymore. I don't think it was probably until many, many years later that the effects of a new lease on life or all that kind of stuff really took hold. Because the funny thing is after that happened, I wound up just like delivering pizza for a while, and then I literally just drove out to California and lived with my friends. And I think the impetus to go out to California may have come from like some of that thought, right? Which, the 9/11 and the lease on life. But yeah, I mean, I'm curious if that even shaped anything. It's interesting. I just think at the time I wasn't mature enough to process it.
So then you eventually quit for real in 2007, I believe.
Yeah,
What
2008.
was the what was the catalyst for that? We're just like, I'm done with
So
this, and
yeah, well, what's interesting is I got as close as I possibly could within the recruiting world to the ideal situation that I always wanted, right? So in the beginning, it was like crappy commute, crappy boss, terrible situation, awful. And then it was like 3, 4 jobs later, it was basically 15-minute walk, two bosses, and just me. Great situation, great guys, total autonomy, good money, like you name it, it was like awesome. Still didn't want to have
yeah,
authority in my life, right? It was just It was just a personal thing. And so, and actually the financial crisis was actually helpful for me technically, because so what happened was is I had been doing, like I said, my websites for about 9 months. They were actually making some money. But when the financial crisis hit, my bosses sat me down. They're like, "Hey, we just need you to know, like, we might not be making money for a little while here, right?" Like they literally said that to me. But they were also really cool in the sense that they said, "You can come to the office every day and do whatever the hell you want. Like, it's cool. Like, we're still trying. We're still, we're still a business. We think we'll be fine in 6 months to a year." And I had money to last me that long, but so what I wound up doing was I wound up working in the office, but I just did my websites all day in the office.
Awesome.
And they didn't care. And it was like, yeah, if something came up for work, yeah, I would help them out. But like I said, it was literally the first $2,000 month that I had is where I made the decision. And I went in and I shook their hand. I said, "Look, I really appreciate you letting me come in all this time, but I think it's time for me to, go off my own and give this a shot." And they respected it. And like I said, never looked back. So it was not, I wasn't even in a bad situation. And by the way, to anyone out there who's thinking about like quitting or whatever, never quit when you're desperate. Never quit when you're miserable. Quit when things are all right, because that's when your brain is functioning at its best. That's when you are most clear and you can really define what you want and what's great out there. Don't get me wrong, you got to feed your family, put food on the table. And if you're not in position to do that, of course, do what you have to do. This is life, right? But that was one of the best quitting moments I've ever had. It was like I knew like this is right for me, and let's give it a go. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, I've got 6 years of recruiting, and I could go back and try and do that again.
It's funny as you're talking. I was down on Wall Street around that time. I worked on water in Fulton, so I'm guessing pretty close to you. And around that time, like how it goes. You go to the deli, to grab your lunch or whatever. So long line, right? The line's out the door, and like as the months went by, the line kept on getting shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter as the economy declined. And I was like, "Whoa, this place is like a ghost town now." And then eventually I was the ghost because I got fired. So it's interesting that you took the correct approach where you're like, "Hey, let me save up some money and actually think about this." Whereas for me, I was just like, "All right, I'm just going to, dick around until somebody fires me." And that's what happened. But let's, can we talk about ICE?
Sure.
ISE?
Sure thing. What would you like to know?
Can you share that model with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's actually something that I adopted very early on, but never really implemented. And for those listening, it's nothing new. I'm not going to sit here and take credit for some sort of, amazing patented formula that I came up with. It's just I wanted an acronym that resonated, that made sense, and was most importantly very, very simple. So it's ISE. I just say, hey, call it ICE. It's easier. So that stands for identify, strategize, and execute. So it's my firm belief, especially for people who are starting out, trying to do something new, maybe start a business at any level. The most important thing is to identify, I always say, 2 to 3, needle movers that are really going to get the job done. And that usually does not involve a website or an email list. People that things that people get obsessed about very early on, like, "Oh man, what am I going to do without a website? What am I going to do?" Like, no. Focus on the needle movers, the stuff that really is going to make an impact on the most important things, which in my opinion is growing a client base and growing your revenue. And so that's the identifying part. And that's something that I help people come up with in the process. And then there's the strategy, which is where it's like, I call the strategy, I've written on this before, I call them have-tos, right? So you know how everybody talks about core values? Everybody says, okay, I've got 2 or 3 core values in my life, and it's like family, health, whatever it might be that's special to you that you really, it's like your code. A have to, in my opinion, is anything that falls under your core values. So anything that supports your core value is what I call a have to. And that is what a strategy is. So let's say that you want to be in shape every day. What's underneath that? The strategy. The strategy could be, well, the needle movers for your health are usually nutrition and physical exercise, right? So what comes under nutrition and exercise? Well, possibly a meal plan, possibly you're doing intermittent fasting from 12 to 8. And then look at the other one, right? Exercise. You're coming up with a specific routine, right? Monday chest, Tuesday, bis and tris, whatever. And so that's the strategy part of it. So once we identify the 2 or 3 needle movers, we then come up with a strategy, which what I tell people, my clients, that's your day to day. That's your, okay, man, I got to do this stuff every single day for the next 2 years and I'll get where I need to go. And then the execution part of it, that is essentially usually the number one reason people hire a coach. It's because they want an accountability partner, someone to push them along the way, remind them when things need to get done, but also encourage them as well. I know sometimes I come off as a little gruff, and people may think that I work out of fear, but that's clearly not the case. Everybody is different, and some people need a hell of a lot of encouragement, and some people need to be told, hey, you're just not cutting it right now, and stop being such a lazy person and get your ass out there and do what you're supposed to do. I find that I excel pretty well in those areas, and that's essentially what ISE is.
I'm wondering in your coaching practice if you're like me, where I want to help people who have also been through some shit, because I've been through some shit, and I know what it's like to not have the support necessary. And sometimes when people come to me like they've never had a challenge in their life, I'm like, I don't really relate to you as much. And I'm also concerned that when I ask you to do something difficult, you won't do it because you're not used to being challenged. So I'm wondering if you have like a bias, more or less, in regards to who you work with based on your experiences.
That's a really, really good question. And the answer is yeah, sure I do. I absolutely have a bias because not every coach is for every client, and not every client is for every coach. And that is absolutely true. And so, and you know this just like I do, you do the best you can to pre-qualify them, right? You do the best you can by putting out the kind of content that resonates with people that are most likely to respond to your teachings or your advice or encouragement. So when it comes to, it's not even a matter of not relating to people who haven't been through shit. It's that if you haven't been through shit, it's very rare that you have the quality that one needs to possess to have a successful venture in wherever you want to go. It's very, very hard to just come right out of the gates and work your ass off having not been through adversity before. So I would say it's almost impossible for me to deal with clients or to come across a person that I could work with who's like, I'm just always used to getting my way, and it's not going to be hard. I mean, the first damn thing I tell people is, hey, this is simple stuff, but it ain't easy. Yeah. It's never easy. So to work with someone that doesn't have that attitude to begin with would be very, very challenging.
You know what's interesting? This was not the goal of my question, but you just empowered our listeners saying, hey, if you've been through some shit, that adversity is actually an advantage because you're building up skills to take on more challenges going forward. So you should be proud of it, not ashamed or try to hide it. And I wish that was my goal of the question because it would have been a brilliant approach. But yeah, and I think, not to get dark, but I think about the CEO of Enron. I can't remember his name right now. The CEO of Enron. Obviously, they were doing some shady stuff, and instead of taking accountability, the guy killed himself in front of his house where his family's living there. You know what I mean? So it's like, yeah. I can't rock with people like that, because I've effed up plenty of times. I've never once, considered ending myself. I considered ending the bad behaviors, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with anyone who did contemplate suicide, but it's like, I just think to myself, how many challenges have you, not had if that was the thing that broke you? I don't get it.
Yeah, one of the things I've written about before, and I really do believe it, is that it may sound cliche, but I really don't care. It's I'm more proud of my losses than my wins. And the first thing I'll say is, no, you don't go out of your way to lose, right? That makes no sense. That's a little ridiculous. But when you think about in your life all the stuff that you've been through, good and bad, I mean, what have you truly learned more from? It's always the loss. And if you can look at life and losses and wins as merely events, it's a very, very different perspective. That's not to say that you don't celebrate your wins or get pissed off at your losses. You should be getting upset when you lose, and you should be happy when you win. But when you can step out of that, let's say a couple days after, a day after, whatever, and just realize that was just another event. What can I take out of that event? And you absolutely learn from your wins, no question about it. But I don't think there's as much learning and reflection, and there's just so much more from a loss. There's just so much more emotional, impact from a loss. And if only we could, like, the hardest thing to do is like smile when things are hard. You know what I mean? Like it sucks when it's happening. But the people that can learn how to do that and recognize, like, hey man, this is just part of it. This is just normal. It's like imposter syndrome. People talk about that all the time. And I've said before many times, I'll say it again, I wear it as a badge of honor. Whenever I'm feeling imposter syndrome that I can't do something, it means I'm like, damn it, I'm uncomfortable. I got to do something like weird here, or not out of the ordinary, or out of the ordinary rather. Otherwise, I'm not going to excel. I'm not going to move. So when people feel that uncomfortable feeling that they want to like brush away, it's really the opposite. You embrace it and sort of understand, like, whoa, this is the stuff I'm actually breaking through. I'm growing here. And that's kind of how I perceive losses. It's very, very similar.
I sometimes like romanticize the experiences I had when I was challenged, like had various challenges. Like when I was unemployed for 5 months, I look back at those times now, I'm like, man, that was so incredible. I grew so much. I was so resourceful in how I got by. And at the same time, I can't go through that again because I have 4 kids. but I'm glad I learned those lessons young. And I try not to be trite when younger people, especially, are going through some stuff, and even my age to an extent, because I'm like, look, this can make you or break you, but you have a choice. And I'm sure someone told me that back then. I was like, buzz off. But it really does build you. It builds resilience. Yeah. It builds strategy. It builds relationships. And it builds connections when you talk about this stuff. Like I say this all the time. People give you opportunities because they feel connected to you. And I got that from, was that Phil Stutz, the guy who did like the Netflix documentary with Jonah Hill. And the more that you share these experiences, that, hey, I've been through some shit, people are like, oh, wow, you're battle hardened and you're still here. Cool, I'll hire you, right? But if you're ashamed of it because you think that you might think it's like a negative, then you don't get credit just for how amazing you are, just for freaking showing up, right? After everything you've been through. So that's why I love this podcast where we get to share these experiences, and I appreciate yours. But I'll leave everyone with this. Let me go back. But I do want to ask you one more question.
Sure.
What is one lesson about life or business that you wish you had learned sooner? And I know there's no regrets, but like, it would have been nice to know a little sooner.
I'll give you a good one that always resonates to me to this day, and I consider it unfinished business. And it's funny because I'm finishing this business in my own way today. But one of my first jobs, well, I mentioned cold calling to you, right? Mm-hmm. About what I did in the trade center. And at that time, it was telecommunications. And I was selling like T1 systems, and that dates me a little bit. But T1 was like the original like high-speed internet stuff. And so I sat in a bullpen, and outside the bullpen, there was like a few offices. And one thing I always saw a lot of were the bosses or the guys who had their own offices. They always seemed to be like casual and cool, like on the phone. They didn't seem to be like struggling like us young guys out there who had to cold call all day. And it didn't feel like they were cold calling at all. And then in another job that I had, I'll never forget this. I hated cold calling so much that it got to the point where I would pretend to be on the phone and there'd be like a dial tone because our boss used to like record our phone time, but he didn't record the conversation. So that's how far I went just to not make calls. But there was this guy who sat next to me just on the phone all day, just smile and dial, right? Like that's all he did was just be on the phone. And to this day, this is now close to 20 years later, he's the president of the same company, still there. And I always had this hint of jealousy towards him. And of course, I got into those conversations, with other people who were also lazy as shit, and we're just like, hey, what's he doing on the phone all the time? You know what I mean? Like but secretly you're a little jealous because, wow, look at that drive. Look at this guy. Like he's really going far. And if I were to, back to your question, in terms of advice, I live by a couple of mottos. One of them is no excuses, get it done. And the other one is you got to do what you got to do. And the one thing that I take from that is everybody has a thing where like you have to break through, I call it. Cold calling is one of the best examples I know of where your life sucks for X amount of time until you break through. And breakthrough can mean you finally get your first inbound call. You finally get a referral. All of a sudden, all those cold calls are not so cold anymore, right? And I looked at my LinkedIn journey as a very similar thing. And I've said this before. I look at commenting and engaging with people as cold calling. It's just the modern day version of it. You're building relationships. So if anything, like I would say to people, whatever that thing is to break through, no matter how painful it is, getting to the other side feels freaking awesome. And that's when your world basically opens up. But it never comes without it being like a serious pain in the ass at some point. And it's the people who sort of get past that, they're the ones who are going to do well.
This has been amazing, Nat. I appreciate it. And I know a lot of our listeners want to learn more about you as well. Sorry, let me go back. Nat, this has been amazing. I appreciate it. And I know a lot of our listeners are going to want to learn more about you as well. So what's the best way for them to do that?
I mean, I have a website. It's my name, natberman.com. And so pretty much whatever you need to know about me is on there. But, like I said, LinkedIn's basically my social media home. So I think on there it's just Nathaniel Berman. If you type it in, I'll probably come up and, post every day on there. And yeah, that's pretty much the best way to get in touch with me. I'm pretty responsive. I just noticed I have a little elephant behind me on that chair. I didn't even realize that. Whatever.
You forgot about the elephant? There's
it's right there.
Cool. Awesome. Nat, this has been amazing. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks. Appreciate it.